Welcome to another episode of Personal Growth Recipes with your host, Ron Denner. Now, we're on to step number 2 of a series I call the number 1 skill set that you must develop, the skill of dealing with people. Now, step 2 is titled 6 Ways to Make People Like You. Now, who doesn't want to make people like us better? If you know any politicians, let them know about this podcast. Seriously, we're going to cover 6 principles that you can apply to your life beginning today. So let's go into it. The first principle is become genuinely interested in other people. And why not study the technique of the greatest winner of friends the world has ever known? Who is this person? You probably meet him tomorrow morning coming down the street. And if you get within 6 feet of him, he's going to probably begin to wag his tail and he'll literally jump out of his skin just to show you how much that he likes you. Did you stop to think that a dog is the only animal that doesn't have to work for a living? A hen has to lay eggs, a cow has to give milk, a canary has to sing. But a dog makes his living by giving you nothing but love. Growing up, we had a pet dog named Norma, and while our kids were growing up, she had those soft eyes that held your attention, and she would jump for excitement at the sight of any of the kids. And I'm positive that dog had never read a book in psychology, I'm sure of it. She didn't need to. She knew by some divine instinct that you can make more friends in 2 months by becoming genuinely interested in other people than you can in 2 years by trying to get other people interested in you. Now let me repeat that. You can make more friends in 2 months by becoming genuinely interested in other people than you can in 2 years by trying to get other people interested in you. Now, you and I know people who blunder through life trying to get other people interested in them. And of course, it doesn't work. People are not interested in you. They're not interested in me. They're interested in themselves. Morning, noon, and after dinner. So when you see a group photograph, that you're in, whose picture do you look at first? I don't know about you, but I look at myself, and I don't know why I keep looking at myself. But I want to give you a simple acronym to remember. It's called FORM, F-O-R-M, FORM. It stands for family, occupation, recreation, and miscellaneous. So the next time you meet someone and you're not sure how to open up the conversation, just remember FORM. Ask about their family first. I don't know about you, but that's the most important thing in my life, and I'm guessing probably yours. So proceed to ask them about their occupation. I'll inquire how did you get into that line of work, or what do you like best about what you do? Proceed to ask them about recreation. What do they like to do in their spare time, or for hobbies, what do they like to do? And the last one is miscellaneous. So with that, I usually ask about, do you enjoy sports, or what kind of shows, TV shows do you like, or music, favorite places that they like to travel to. The list can be whatever you want, basically. Now, this is not only effective, but it shows a lot of courtesy and sincerity on our part. And one last thing when we greet people, if you want to make friends, try to greet people with some enthusiasm. When someone calls you on the telephone, say hello in tones that show like how you're pleased to actually talk to them. And another thing, smile when the phone rings. Your smile is going to actually come across the phone. And one of the things that's amazed me over the years is the amount of money that these companies will spend decorating the front entrances of their offices to make a good first impression. Then they'll turn right around and hire a receptionist who, they look like or seem like they've been weaned on a pickle, But we've all had that experience at a restaurant, where a waiter or waitress with a less than friendly attitude can leave literally a worse taste in our mouth than the food could ever leave. And, if you're dealing with the public, just remember this. You can literally make or break a business. So in summary, if you want other people to like you, if you want to develop real friendships, try to keep this principle in mind. Become genuinely interested in other people. Now, the second principle, we've already talked about it, smile. Just smile. Actions definitely do speak louder than words. And when we smile, what we're really doing is we're saying, I like you. I'm glad to see you. We've all been around when a baby smile can change the whole atmosphere in a room. And I'll admit that it's easy to get into a rut and forget to smile more often. And I'm very fortunate. I have a wife that is very natural at smiling a lot, and she's just a frequent reminder to me to smile more often. Now, I've discovered that if you don't feel like smiling, there's some things you can do to, force yourself to smile. If you're alone, force yourself to whistle or hum a tune or sing. Act as if you're already happy, and this will tend to make you more happy. You see, everybody in the world is seeking happiness, and there's one sure way to find it, and that is by controlling your thoughts. See, happiness doesn't depend on outward conditions. It depends on inner conditions. It isn't what you have or who you are or where you are or what you're doing that makes you happy or unhappy. It's what you and I think about. That's what makes us happy or unhappy. It's what we think about. It's like the story of the two salespeople that were sent to a very remote country in Africa to sell shoes. And, none of the locals, they wore shoes. And so one salesman, he asked to be sent back home because, hey, guys, nobody wears shoes here. It's a complete waste of time. He never smiled. He was negative. The other salesman told his boss, add another shift at the factory, hire more workers. He said, no one over here wears any shoes. And our market has unlimited potential. So this guy smiled often and he was positive. So, remember this. We don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. And your smile is a messenger of your goodwill, and it does improve your attitude. And your smile is going to brighten the life of anybody who sees it. So remember principle number 2, smile and smile often. So the third principle is remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest sound in any language. The average person is more interested in his or her name than in all the names on earth put together. Libraries and museums owe their names and richest collections to people that cannot bear the thought that their names might perish from the memory of the human race. And many of these libraries are named in honor of someone that was a generous donor. So one important skill to practice is the skill of remembering names. Now, most people really struggle in this, and especially people we've just met. Now, if we don't hear the name distinctly, ask very politely, sorry, I didn't get your name. Ask them to repeat it or even spell it. It shows them that their name is important to you. So, and to help remember their name, just repeat their name a few times during and after the conversation. And after the conversation, even write it down if it helps you. So the importance, of remembering names is almost as important in business and social contexts, really, as it is in politics. From the waitress to the senior executive, remembering and saying their names to them will work magic as we deal with people. People love to hear their first name. So remember principle number 3, a person's name to that person is the sweetest and most important sound in any language. The fourth principle, be a good listener and encourage other people to talk about themselves. Now, we've all had that experience with usually a salesperson, unfortunately, who doesn't have the sense to be a good listener. They interrupt before we're finished talking, and they'll make recommendations that they prefer instead of asking what we prefer. I had a mentor and a good friend who taught me a lot about this. And he said, in order to be a good conversationalist, you need to be a good listener. And to be a good listener, you got to ask questions with bridge phrases. So the next time someone that you're talking to says something interesting, say a bridge phrase like, is that so? Or can you tell me more about it? Or that's very interesting. I'd like to hear more about that. See, those are bridge phrases. They're a connection to that other person. During the darkest hours of the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln, he wrote to an old friend to ask him to come to Washington. What Lincoln said is that he had some problems that he wanted to discuss with his old friend. So the old neighbor, he came to the White House, and Lincoln talked to him for several hours about the advisability of issuing a proclamation freeing the slaves. And Lincoln went over all the arguments for and against such a move. Lincoln read newspaper articles to his friends, some of them denouncing him for freeing the slaves, and some of the articles denouncing him for not freeing the slaves. And after Lincoln talked for several hours, he shook hands with his old neighbor and said goodbye. And his old neighbor left to go back home without even saying a word or asking for his opinion. Lincoln, he did all the talking himself. And that just seemed to simply clarify his mind. So Lincoln, he didn't want advice. What he really wanted was a sympathetic, friendly listener to whom he could take some of the burden off himself. And that's what we all usually want when we're in trouble, if you think about it. That's really what the irritated customer wants, or the dissatisfied employee, or our hurt friend wants. So if you and I want to be a good conversationalist, just be a good listener. So you don't have to come up with a solution. You sometimes just be a good listener. To be interesting, be interested. Ask questions that the other person will enjoy answering. Encourage them to talk about themselves and their accomplishments. Remember that people that you and I are talking to are 100 times more interested in themselves, their wants, and their problems than they are in our problems. So remember principle number 4, be a good listener. Encourage other people to talk about themselves. Now, principle number 5 is talk in terms of the other person's interests. Now, everyone who was ever a guest of one of our earlier presidents, Theodore Roosevelt, was astonished at the range and diversity of his knowledge. Whether his guest was a cowboy or a politician, Roosevelt knew what to say. And how did he do it? The answer is simple. Whenever Roosevelt expected a visitor, he would sit up late the night before. He would read up on the subject in which he knew his guest was interested. You see, Roosevelt knew that the royal road to a person's heart is to talk about the things that the other person treasures the most. So kind of remember that, the next time you're in someone's house, for instance, notice what's the pictures hanging on the wall or any special decorations or collections. These are usually signs that are important to that person, easy to bring up in conversation. We all have close friends that have hobbies, interests, and issues that we know that are important to them. And, unfortunately, we take for granted those closest to us, unfortunately. So remember this when you're talking to those closest to us, especially. So remember principle number 5, talk in terms of the other person's interests. Principle number 6, make the other person feel important and do it sincerely. Now, there's one very important law of human conduct. If we obey this law, we'll almost never get into trouble. If this law is obeyed, it's going to bring us countless friends and constant happiness. The law is this: always make the other person feel important. Now, the desire to be important is simply the deepest urge in human nature. It's this urge that differentiates us from animals. It's this urge that's been responsible really for civilization itself. Jesus summed it up in one thought: do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And this principle can serve us in so many interactions in our daily life. I'll give you a quick example. If you're in a restaurant and the waitress brings you mashed potatoes instead of French fries, say something like, I'm sorry to trouble you, but I prefer French fries. And she'll probably reply, no problem, no trouble, because what we've done is we've shown her some respect. Little phrases like that: I'm sorry to trouble you. Would you be so kind as, or won't you please, or would you mind? These are just little courtesies that'll make a difference. There's a famous quote: every person I meet is a superior in some way. In that, I learn from them. Another famous quote: talk to other people about themselves and they're going to listen for hours. I like that. So remember principle number 6, make the other person feel important and do it sincerely. And I want to thank you guys, gals, for listening to this podcast, and I invite you to tune in to my upcoming podcast next Wednesday. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to like, share, and leave a comment down below. Follow me on Twitter at Ron Dinner. Follow me on Instagram at DinnerRon. I invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Ron Dinner. Please subscribe to Personal Growth Recipes on Apple Podcasts, and please give us a 5-star rating if you've liked it and you enjoyed it. And please like and share our Facebook page, Personal Growth Recipes. And this is your host. This is Ron Denor, your host for Personal Growth Recipes, serving up and signing off.